You are listening to the podcast Coffee and Resistance Literature, promoting cultural exchange through literature, by the CRENAC Research Project and supported by the American Embassy to celebrate 200 years of diplomatic relations between Brazil and the United States. Hello, I am Mabel. I hold a master's degree in Languages and Knowledge in the Amazon. I am graduated in English Language and Literature, and I am also a Bachelor in Law.
And I am Yasmin, undergraduate student in English language. Welcome to the podcast Coffee and Resistance Literature, promote cultural exchange through literature.
Our podcast episode talks about The Handmaid's Tale, a novel published in 1985 by the Canadian writer Margaret Atwood. The book is a dystopia, and it brings together several elements of the genre, such as dehumanization, violence, and oppression by a totalitarian regime. This regime, in this case, is the state of Gilead, founded after a coup d'etat in the territory that had once corresponded to the United States. Gilead is a classist and sexist society marked by religious fundamentalism in which women are divided into castes according to some criteria. The most determining of them is the reproductive capacity. Margaret Atwood wrote The Handmaid's Tale during a period of growing political and social conservatism in North America, reflecting concerns about women's rights and individual freedom.
Trigger warning. This episode contains discussions about sexual violence and oppression that may be sensitive to some listeners.
Let's start by talking about the first cast, the aunts. They supervise the training and indoctrination of the maids. They wear brown, a color that symbolizes their austerity. Austerity here refers to the severity and rigidity with which the aunts conduct their tasks, imposing discipline and control on the maids. They direct the Red Center, where the maids are indoctrinated. They have some power in that society because they are responsible for Gilead's propaganda and for not allowing the maids to escape. They read biblical sermons, conduct violent sessions of an allegedly therapy in which the maids are exposed to vexatious situations, instill guilt, and execute punishments. In the work, there were many women willing to serve as aunts, either because of a genuine belief in the so-called traditional values or due to the benefits they would have in this position. When power is scarce, having some of it is tempting.
The second cast is that of the wives. They wear blue, a color that represents nobility. These women had helped men to found the state of Gilead, and for this reason they have some prestige in that regime, in that supposedly monogamous society marked by religious norms. They are the women in the high social position there, married to men who also have status. They are also victims of oppression, but they do not perceive themselves as oppressed. Wives are not allowed to read. They only need scarves for men who fight in battles, representing what was formerly known as housewives, which would be much important for a woman that intellectual autonomy. There is a dichotomy in wives. Married is a privilege, but they experience envy or jealousy of the maids because of their fertility. One of them even hits a maid with one of the knitting needles. Although they are partly responsible for the violence suffered by other women, they are also victims of the totalitarian regime.
The third caste is formed by the maids. Who are they? Represented by the red color, by the birth blood, they are the figures that personify the extreme subjugation and female oppression in the state of Gilead, whose bodies are taken as the property of the state due to their reproductive capacity. They suffer a process of loss of autonomy and identity, in which their relationships, their families, their lives before the coup d'etat are totally invalidated, and even their names are erased. Everything was taken away from them. The name Offred of the narrator protagonist comes from of Fred, or belonging to Fred. The reproductive exploration of the maids occurs systematically through a monthly ritual, which consists of a rape with the presence of the wife for the insemination of that female body. And this ritual has a religious discourse that sustains it, of a supposed mission to generate children for the state of Gilead. Is faith justifying oppression? Although women are raped in the presence of other women, in this case the wives, exemplifying Simone de Beauvoir's quote, with the oppressor would be not so strong if he did not have accomplices among the oppressed, there are secret alliances between the maids as strategies of survival and resistance. These strategies include the formation of secret support networks, clandestine communication, and escape plans from the oppressive regime.
And speaking of resistance, it is interesting to note how the secret alliances between the maids are a powerful form of supervision within such an oppressive regime. These alliances show that, even in extreme situations, solidarity and the search for freedom can flourish.
Exactly, Yasmin. And this leads us to think of other works that also address resistance in contexts of oppression. An example that comes to mind is Quarto de Despejo by Carolina Maria de Jesus, a diary in which Carolina narrates her life in the Canindé favela in São Paulo. The work exposes the harsh reality of poverty and the daily struggle for survival. Like Gilead's maid, Carolina finds forms of resistance and resilience in the midst of oppression.
It is impressive how, despite the difference in context, both works show the resistance of women in the face of adverse situations. While in The Handmaid's Tale, the maids form secret alliances to survive and resist the Gilead regime. In Quarto de Despejo, Carolina Maria de Jesus uses right as a form of resistance and denunciation. Carolina manifests resistance in different ways. It is perceived through her narrative of everyday life. Carolina documents her life in the favela, exposes the difficulties and the injustice she faced daily. This act of right itself is a powerful form of resistance, as it gives voice to a black and poor woman, a group often silenced in society. By describing her reality, Carolina challenges hegemonic narratives and creates a space for the expression of marginalized experience. Her diary is an act of personal and cultural survival, revealing her struggle against social and political invisibility. Carolina de Jesus exemplifies social inequalities by describing her reality in the favela not only as a woman, but as a mother. She mentions that when she prepares 4 dishes of rice and beans, food that is not within the reach of most people in the favela, she feels that she is someone. Although it may be considered a simple and popular food in Brazil, it is not within the reach of the entire population. It is not accessible every day. Carolina describes almost as a luxury. It is just an example of her voice as a form of decolonial resistance.
Quarto de Despejo is a powerful book. Actually, both authors, Carolina Maria de Jesus and Margaret Atwood, inspire us to reflect on current issues such as reproductive rights, female autonomy, motherhood, gender inequalities, and social inequalities. These are themes that continue to be debated and that show the relevance of their works.
That's why The Handmaid's Tale is defined as a dystopia. Several characteristics of a dystopia are evident in the book, such as a society marked by totalitarian control, loss of individual freedoms, and widespread oppression. But Mabel, how do you see the interrelation between privilege and oppression in the Wives of Gilead?
Well, the wives are often married to high-ranking commanders as they hold a privileged position in the social hierarchy. They are not subjugated to sexual servitude and controlled reproduction, as the maids are. Wives are valued for their status and their ability to maintain the households. Their primary role is to manage the domestic sphere and support the patriarchal structure of Gilead through their marriages. They live in relative comfort, enjoying more freedom of movement and access to material wealth, but their lives are still controlled by the same patriarchal structures. The wives are defined by their roles as households and mothers, so their power is restricted to the domestic sphere.
They also experience complex emotions towards the maids. Wives are in a relatively safe position. On the other hand, they experience the frustration of being confined to a role that revolves around the fertility.
As someone who has studied not only literature but also law, I cannot think of The Handmaid's Tale as disconnected to the notion of human rights, because reproductive rights are fundamental human rights. These rights encompass a person's ability to make decisions about their own reproductive health, access to contraception, and sexual education, for example. These rights ensure that individuals have control over their bodies, free from coercion or discrimination. Reproductive rights are built around the concept of bodily autonomy.
That's true. When reproductive rights are undermined or denied, it reflects broader violations of human rights, including gender equality, personal freedom, and dignity. Governments or systems that restrict reproductive rights are often engaged in broad patterns of discrimination, where certain individuals, especially women, are denied the agency to make choices about their lives. This suppression of reproductive autonomy is a crucial tool in maintaining societal control over marginalized groups, particularly women.
Yasmin, how do you think this writes to the book itself? I mean, there are several possibilities to talk about The Handmaid's Tale, but I would like to hear your point of view.
We know the theme of reproductive rights is central to the novel. These rights are not just restricted, but controlled through violence. Margaret Atwood discusses the exploration of power, control, and gender equality. The ceremony, or the monthly ritual, is a horrifying practice that illustrates the extremes to which the regime goes to control women's bodies.
The erosion of reproductive rights is an extreme violation of basic human rights and freedom. In the book, it may sound absurd, but there are some examples in history of women being reduced to their reproductive function. So, the book serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of reproductive rights, gender equality, and bodily autonomy.
At last, The Handmaid's Tale reminds us that the fight for reproductive rights is not just a fight for women's health, it's a fight for the humanity.
This is our analysis, but there are several other possibilities. Not only The Handmaid's Tale, but all the works mentioned in other episodes of the podcast are strong and intriguing stories.
We would like to thank the U.S. Embassy for supporting this project in celebration of 200 years of diplomatic relations between Brazil and the United States.
We'd like to thank you for listening until the end. We hope you enjoy it. Bye.